The glass door shattered inward with a sound like breaking. Not an accident, a statement. Patricia Sanderson didn't flinch at the crash or the three figures stepping through the wreckage. She'd heard worse sounds in Fallujah, in back alleys, in field hospitals. The Bronze Star, mounted on her motorized wheelchair, caught the harsh fluorescent light of the Starbucks just long enough to make them pause. 1 heartbeat. 2. Just enough time for her brothers to move. Because they were already in position, the Riverside Commons Starbucks occupied prime real estate where Mill Avenue intersected with Tempe, Arizona. White subway tiles, Edison bulbs, a pastry case reflecting distorted faces. The kind of corporate space where people typed urgently on MacBooks, pretending their work mattered more than the person sitting 3 feet away. Patricia appreciated the anonymity. Predictable. A place where she could be just another disabled veteran watching autumn sunlight through the windows, remembering when she could chase it on 2 legs. Her hands rested loosely on the wheelchair's controls, modified, built for function. The barista, a rail-thin kid named Tyler with a nose ring, approached her corner table. "Refill, Miss Sanderson?" His voice carried that practiced gentleness reserved for the visibly disabled. Patricia offered the ghost of a smile. "Appreciate it, Tyler." Her voice was soft but commanded attention. 3 tables over sat 2 men who shared her cheekbones, her focused stare, the same coiled readiness in their shoulders, despite wearing civilian clothes. Marcus, Ghost, Sanderson, and David, Doc, Sanderson. Her younger twin brothers by 18 months, both former Marine Raiders, both supposedly visiting for Patricia's birthday, both ensuring Tempe was safe. The Starbucks hummed with false peace. Espresso machines hissed. Someone's laptop played a true crime podcast. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Camelback Mountain sat in the distance. It should have been just another Tuesday afternoon in October, but peace is only the pause before someone decides it's negotiable. The entrance detonated inward. Safety glass exploded across the tile. Not an accident. 3 figures stepped through the destruction like they'd practiced this, boots crunching glass into smaller pieces, their laughter preceding them like a weapon. Leather vests. Road-stained denim. The particular swagger of men who'd confused intimidation with identity so long ago they couldn't remember the difference. Tyler the barista froze mid-pour, ceramic mug trembling in his hand. The manager, a middle-aged woman named Susan, with a mortgage and bills, looked up from inventory sheets, her jaw locking around words that died before reaching air. Customers contracted into themselves, shoulders hunching, eyes dropping, the universal body language of prey recognizing predators. The leader walked point, 6'2", 220. Arms sleeved in prison-quality ink, featuring skulls and flames, shaved head catching light. Eyes that scanned the room not to observe, but to appraise, calculating who would break first. His name was Derek Chains, Morrison local enforcer. The kind of man who'd weaponized his own emptiness so thoroughly he couldn't remember what it felt like to be full. Behind him slouched Kenny Wu, younger, thinner, all nervous energy and bad decisions. He moved like someone who'd been following orders since birth and never questioned whether they were worth following. Derek's boot struck tile like a gavel-pounding verdict. He walked like the universe bent around his gravity. Patricia didn't move. Her gaze remained fixed on Camelback Mountain outside, though her entire nervous system had already catalogued the threat. Breathing unchanged. Posture relaxed. Stillness as armor. Ghost and Doc had stopped mid-conversation. Their eyes lifted simultaneously, 2 surveillance systems activating. No alarm, no panic. Just perfect awareness. Derek's voice hit the air like gravel under tires. "Cute fucking place." Silence swallowed his words. He laughed, not because anything was funny, but because laughter was another tool in his humiliation arsenal. Leon drifted toward the counter, invading Tyler's personal space with casual entitlement. Coffee? Black, and make it fucking quick. Not a request, a test. Tyler nodded, hands shaking. Derek's gaze swept across every table, judging, sorting, dismissing. Then he saw the Bronze Star. The military commendation mounted on Patricia's wheelchair caught the afternoon light. Derek's stride faltered, just a microsecond barely perceptible to anyone who wasn't trained to read body language. He tilted his head slightly, realigning his sight with something he hadn't expected to find in a Tempe Starbucks on a Tuesday afternoon. He didn't smile. Not yet. He walked toward Patricia's table, straight line, no hesitation, Boots announcing his approach. The cafe forgot how to breathe. Patricia lifted her eyes slowly, deliberately, meeting his gaze with calm that unsettles predators more than resistance. Derek stopped beside her wheelchair, one thumb hooked through his belt loop. "Well," he said, voice low enough that silence amplified it, "isn't this some patriotic bullshit?" Patricia didn't respond. She'd learned in Fallujah that silence could cut deeper than words, that refusing to engage was its own form of warfare. Derek leaned closer, his shadow falling across her table. "You look like you could use some help getting around." Patricia's voice came out flat. "I'm good." Derek laughed softly, shaking his head like someone savoring a private joke at a funeral. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached out and tapped the bronze star with one greasy fingertip. Once, twice. "This supposed to impress somebody?" His voice carried across the cafe. Patricia looked at him, not with anger, not with fear, but with a quiet certainty that made men like Derek uncomfortable. "I earned it," she said simply. Derek blinked. A tiny pause, barely a fraction of a second. But Ghost and Doc both caught it. Men like Derek only paused when they felt something unfamiliar scraping against their emptiness. Something tightened in the air, invisible, suffocating, unmistakable. Derek's finger lingered on the bronze star just long enough to transform touch into ownership. Patricia didn't flinch, didn't shift, didn't grant him satisfaction of movement. Her stillness was a mirror showing his own hollowness reflected back. He pulled his hand away with a sharp exhale. "What'd you earn exactly?" he asked, voice spreading like oil across water. "A participation trophy for getting your legs blown off?" The Starbucks imploded. The air pressure changed. Tyler dropped a spoon behind the counter, the metallic clatter sounding like a gunshot. Patricia's voice stayed level, a surgical instrument cutting through Derek's performance. "I earned it so people like you could stand here and say stupid shit without getting shot." The words landed without echo. Derek stared at her, and for maybe 2 seconds, confusion replaced cruelty. It didn't last. He leaned down until Patricia could smell stale beer and cigarettes. "You think that metal means shit here?" Patricia didn't respond. Silence again. Silence like titanium. Derek's lip curled back from yellowed teeth. "What'd they do, huh? Pin it on you out of fucking pity after they wheeled you out of Walter Reed like damaged goods?" The Starbucks gasped soft, collective. The sound of a moral line being crossed in real time. Ghost didn't move? Not yet. Doc didn't breathe. Not yet. Patricia's eyes didn't waver, didn't blink, didn't concede an inch. "It was never about me," she said quietly. "It was about the Marines I served with who didn't come home." Derek's voice rose, not with anger but with triumph. "Oh, brothers and sisters in arms," he sneered the phrase. "Where the fuck are they now?" He reached out, grabbed the armrest of her wheelchair, and shoved. Not hard enough to injure, hard enough to humiliate. The wheelchair slid back an inch. A coffee cup rattled on the table. Dark liquid spread slowly across the surface, dripping down the edge onto Patricia's jeans. She didn't look down, and because she didn't, everyone else did. The humiliation wasn't in the push. It was in her refusal to be moved by it. Derek felt that refusal like a slap. He needed more. Needed her to break, to cry, to prove his worldview correct. He leaned in, eyes wild. "You hear me?" he said. "This is my fucking city, my rules, and I don't care what war you think you fought." He reached for her hair, and that's when the room stopped being a Starbucks and became a containment zone. Ghost simply stood up. It was the kind of movement that made people look up without knowing why. A chair did not scrape. A table did not shift. There was no rushed breath, no huff of anger. Just one man rising from his seat, and suddenly the molecular structure of the room rearranged itself around his presence. Doc rose half a second later, not following, but harmonizing. 2 notes of the same lethal chord they'd been playing since Helmand Province. Derek didn't notice yet. He was too committed to his performance. His hand closed around a fistful of Patricia's hair, or tried to, because Patricia lifted her hand with mechanical precision, placing it gently atop his wrist. No force, no aggression, just contact. Her eyes met his with the flat calm of someone who'd killed before and made peace with it. "Let go," she said quietly. Derek laughed. And that's when Kenny's breath caught like a man who just realized he was standing on a landmine. He saw it, felt it, knew with cellular certainty that something catastrophic was about to unfold. He opened his mouth. "Derek, don't. Too late." Ghost's voice, calm as a Sunday sermon and twice as final, traveled across the Starbucks like a shockwave. "Step away from my sister." Not loud, not shouted, not theatrical. Just a statement of physical law about to be enforced. Derek turned his head, still gripping Patricia's hair. That was his last mistake, because Ghost and Doc weren't men who reacted to violence, they were men who ended it. Ghost's hand closed around Derek's wrist, the one tangled in Patricia's hair, with surgical precision, thumb pressing into exact leverage points, fingers locking, turning Derek's entire hand into a lever he no longer controlled. Derek's face twisted, muscles spasming, his grip released instantly, involuntarily, like a puppet with cut strings. Ghost spoke, voice low and absolute. "Don't touch her." Derek snarled and swung his free hand in a wide arc. Ghost stepped inside the swing's radius, shoulder rolling, redirecting the kinetic energy past his body like water flowing around stone. Derek staggered, off balance, his center of gravity betraying him. Ghost pivoted textbook hip throw, and Derek's 220-pound frame met the tile floor in a single percussive thump that rattled coffee cups 3 tables away. The Starbucks gasped collectively. At the exact same moment, Doc moved. Leon had lunged toward Ghost. Doc intercepted him between heartbeats. No wind-up, no theatrical preparation. A short, compact strike drove straight into Leon's solar plexus, the kind of blow that doesn't look devastating until the recipient realizes their diaphragm has forgotten how to function. Leon collapsed forward, mouth opening and closing. Doc caught him by the collar to prevent his face from hitting tile, easing him down with something approaching gentleness, professional, respectful, mercy wrapped in violence. The entire sequence took 4 seconds. Kenny froze mid-step, hands raised to chest level, not attacking, not defending, just suspended, trapped between the man he'd pretended to be and the person he'd always feared he wasn't. Ghost now had Derek prone, face pressed against tile. Ghost's knee rested lightly between Derek's shoulder blades, not crushing, not punishing, just controlling, with the kind of leverage only someone trained to dismantle human bodies could execute. Derek writhed, cursed, spat threats that evaporated before reaching air. Ghost didn't increase pressure. Didn't need to. "You're done," Ghost said simply, voice devoid of emotion. Derek tried to buck upward, muscles straining against inevitability. Ghost made one microscopic adjustment, a rotation of wrist, a shift of weight, and Derek's entire body went rigid with compliance. Not breaking, just reminding. Across the room, Leon wheezed on his hands and knees, clutching his ribs. Doc stepped back, not looming, not threatening, just present. An immovable object wearing a flannel shirt and a calm expression. Kenny backed toward the shattered entrance, hands still raised, voice trembling. I didn't sign up for this." Patricia looked at him with clear-eyed recognition that made Kenny turn away, ashamed. Tyler finally exhaled behind the counter, his hands shaking violently. Ghost turned his head fractionally, maintaining his hold. "Tyler, it's okay. You're safe now." Tyler covered his mouth, tears streaming, but he nodded. Susan stepped out from behind the counter, palms visible. Her voice came out hoarse. "You need zip ties?" Ghost nodded once. Susan returned 30 seconds later with heavy-duty ties from the supply closet. Ghost didn't rush. No urgency. No adrenaline tremors. He bound Derek's wrists with measured precision, checking circulation, ensuring no nerve compression. Not cruel, not sloppy, lawful. The way a Marine restrains an enemy combatant adhering to rules of engagement even when the enemy wouldn't. Doc did the same with Leon, kneeling beside him, murmuring instructions. Breathe slow, in through your nose. You're gonna be fine. Even now, administering care to someone who'd come to terrorize, mercy as muscle memory. Patricia's voice entered the aftermath. This is where it ends, Derek. Derek panted against tile, sweat pooling beneath his cheek. You don't know who the fuck runs this neighborhood. Patricia didn't blink, didn't lean forward, didn't dignify the threat with emotion. Yes, she said, and that's the problem. Outside, sirens began their ascending wail. Not frantic, not panicked, just coming. Ghost eased back from Derek, transitioning to a seated ready position, palms visible, prepared to comply with law enforcement protocols. Doc stood over Leon, arms loose at his sides, breathing even. Patricia sat in her wheelchair, hands resting on the controls, calm as sunrise. The sirens grew louder. 3 Tempe PD cruisers pulled into the Starbucks parking lot with practiced efficiency. Ghost eased further back from Derek, hands now visible at shoulder height, fingers spread. Doc mirrored the posture beside Leon, whose breathing had finally stabilized into ragged gasps. Patricia remained exactly where she'd been from the beginning, still, steady, anchored. The Starbucks door opened carefully around the shattered frame. Uniformed officers entered with hands near holsters, but not drawing. One officer stepped forward, his nameplate reading, Martinez, late 30s, compact build, eyes that had processed too many disturbances to be shocked by much. But those eyes widened fractionally when they landed on Patricia's wheelchair, lingered on the bronze star, then tracked to Ghost and Doc. Recognition flickered, the specific recognition of one warrior identifying others. Who's responsible for the restraints? Martinez asked, voice steady and professional. Ghost raised one hand slightly, keeping the other visible. James Sanderson, USMC, retired. My brother David, also Marines. We acted to protect our sister and everyone present. No weapons deployed. Minimum necessary force. Martinez nodded once. He turned to Patricia, and his expression softened by exactly 1 degree. Ma'am, are you injured? Patricia lifted her chin slightly, voice unchanged. I'm fine, officer. Martinez believed her immediately. He knelt beside Derek, checking restraints, wrist position, breathing. You're conscious and breathing, Martinez said flatly to Derek. So this went better for you than you deserved. Derek spat weakly toward the floor. You have no idea who you're fucking with. Martinez raised an eyebrow. That line never means what people think it means. Derek's smirk flickered, confidence cracking like sun-damaged paint. Kenny finally found his voice again, thin and reedy. We were just sent to make a point. That's all it was supposed to be. Martinez's gaze shifted to him, waiting for truth. Kenny swallowed hard. She said it would be easy, that the neighborhood needed examples. He stopped, recalibrating. Victoria told us this was about maintaining property values. The name dropped into the room like a coin into a well. Martinez exhaled slowly through his nose, not surprised, not confused, tired. Of course, he muttered. Patricia spoke, voice still that maddeningly calm. Who is she to you? Kenny didn't look at Patricia when he answered. He studied the tile floor. She's the one who decides who stays and who goes. Who gets fined into foreclosure. Martinez rose slowly, looking at Ghost, then Doc, then Patricia. You all need to understand something, he said, voice carrying warning wrapped in experience. If Victoria Blake is involved, this isn't the end. He paused. This is the beginning. The Starbucks was quiet again, but different now. This silence had weight. Outside, the October sun continued its crawl across Tempe, indifferent to human drama. Patricia's hands remained steady on her wheelchair controls. She'd survived Fallujah, survived Walter Reed, survived learning to live without legs. She could survive whatever Victoria Blake decided to throw next. The Sanderson house occupied a quiet cul-de-sac 3 blocks from Mill Avenue. Spanish tile roof, desert landscaping, a covered patio. A house that looked ordinary, peaceful, forgettable. But the night they returned home, the air felt different, charged, expectant. Ghost locked the front door with a quiet, deliberate click. Doc checked every window latch, every blind angle. The backyard, beyond the patio, not paranoid, just operationally aware. Sarah stood near the kitchen island, arms wrapped around herself. She wasn't a soldier, wasn't trained for violence. She built websites, managed social media campaigns, wrote code. But her hands shook, like someone who just learned how quickly civilization could break. Jennifer set a kettle on the stove, because that's what she did. When reality spun too fast, she gave people something warm to hold on to. Patricia wheeled herself to the center of the living room where late afternoon sun still painted the Saltillo tile amber. Her face was calm, not hardened, just certain. Ghost leaned against the wall, arms crossed loosely. Doc remained near the sliding glass door, positioned where he could monitor the street. Ghost spoke first. Victoria Blake. The name didn't echo. It just sat there, heavy and undeniable. Sarah swallowed hard. She's been running Riverside Commons like a personal kingdom for 6 years. Fines, nobody can appeal. Rules, nobody voted on. Doc nodded slowly. Fear's cheaper than lawyers. Patricia's eyes narrowed fractionally. It's not about lawns or paint colors, she said quietly. It's about proving she can make you comply. Jennifer placed 4 mugs of chamomile tea on the coffee table, and now she thinks we're next. Ghost didn't look away from Patricia. She sent men to humiliate you. No heat in his voice, just truth. Patricia breathed in slowly. No, she said. She sent them to see if we'd break. Doc let out a quiet, humorless exhale. She badly miscalculated. Ghost's mouth lifted fractionally recognition. The same recognition they'd shared in Helmand, in Ramadi, in a dozen firefights where the odds were impossible but they'd survived anyway. Sarah moved to the dining table, opening her MacBook. Within seconds, documents populated the screen, scanned HOA violations, email chains, lien notifications. People have been sending me things for months, she said. I just didn't see the pattern, not until today. Jennifer sat beside her, voice gentle but steel reinforced. Then we start seeing it now. Ghost looked at Patricia. This isn't just about us, Patricia nodded once. No, it's about everyone who was told to be afraid. The room went quiet again, but this quiet wasn't heavy. It was purposeful. Doc stepped away from the window. Martinez knows more than he said. He'll come back when he's ready. Patricia agreed. Ghost pushed off the wall. Nobody fights this kind of thing alone. Patricia looked up at both of them, her brothers, who'd followed her through combat. And we won't. The patio wind chimes sang softly as the sun dipped toward the McDowell Mountains. The sky shifted from turquoise to indigo. Jennifer spoke quietly. She thinks people are too scared to stand up. Patricia rested her hands gently on her wheelchair's armrests. Then we help them remember how. Sarah looked at her. You really think the neighborhood will come together? Patricia didn't hesitate. Yes. Ghost and Doc both nodded because when Patricia Sanderson said yes, doubt wasn't part of the equation. Outside, a dark sedan rolled slowly past the house, not threatening, just observing. The wind shifted. The chimes rang louder. A storm was gathering. Not the kind that rolled across the Sonoran Desert. The other kind. The one made by people who'd finally decided enough was enough. Morning arrived gently over Tempe's planned communities. Sprinklers whispered over drought-resistant landscaping. Birds perched on decorative agave. The air smelled faintly of chlorine and oleander, but the street didn't feel the same. Something fundamental had shifted. Patricia noticed first. She rolled herself onto the front patio, coffee mug warming her hands. The sun had barely cleared the Superstition Mountains, yet figures already lingered at driveways and mailboxes. Neighbors who once hurried past with eyes down now paused. One wave, another. A quiet nod shared, like contraband silent recognition that I saw what happened. I saw you stand. Ghost leaned against the patio column beside her. Doc stood near the steps, drinking coffee from a chipped Marine's mug. A woman in a linen cardigan stood at the end of their walkway, clutching a manila envelope to her chest. Her name was Helen Rodriguez, early 60s, retired high school guidance counselor. She hesitated, shifting weight from foot to foot. Jennifer stepped onto the patio, smiling softly. "It's okay, Helen. Come up." The woman exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for 6 years, and walked forward one slow step at a time. When she reached Patricia, she pressed the envelope into her hands. "Copies," Helen whispered. "Every violation notice. Every fine. I paid them all. I didn't know what else to do." Her voice cracked. "I thought if I just followed the rules, she'd stop." Patricia didn't speak immediately. Helen's voice trembled, but didn't break. "She never stops. She just finds new rules." Her eyes glistened. "I saw what you did yesterday. And for the first time in 6 years, I thought maybe someone could actually stand up to her." Ghost descended one step, slow and respectful. "You're not alone, ma'am." Helen nodded, but tears slipped down her cheeks anyway. Doc placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." Her breath shuddered, because those were words she'd needed for 6 years. She left lighter than she'd arrived, but she wasn't the last. Before noon, more neighbors appeared. A young father with exhausted eyes, a widow who'd lost her husband to cancer, a teenager gripping her phone with screenshots, each story different, each pain shared, each one a spark. Sarah sat at the dining table, scanning documents, creating folders. Jennifer wrote names and dates in neat columns. Doc photocopied forms. Ghost sorted evidence into labeled folders, not for revenge, for prosecution. Patricia listened to each person one by one, as though they were the only person in the world. Because to someone who's been living under manufactured fear, being heard is the first step back to being alive. And all across Riverside Commons, blinds fluttered. The neighborhood was watching, not hiding, watching. By late afternoon, word had traveled farther than patios and sidewalks. It moved through Ring doorbell groups, Facebook pages, text chains. Not like gossip, but like oxygen returning to suffocated lungs. Victoria Blake felt it long before anyone said her name aloud. She stood at her picture window, arms crossed tightly, diamond tennis bracelet catching afternoon light. Her jaw was granite. She watched neighbors walking toward the Sanderson house instead of scurrying past it. She watched people standing still rather than lowering their heads. She watched fear loosen its grip, and something inside her twisted sharp, hot, panicked. Control was fragile. Once cracked, it didn't break slowly. It shattered. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned copper and violet, Patricia sat on the patio again. Children played basketball nearby. A dog barked. Someone grilled food, the smell drifting on the breeze. The world looked normal, but everywhere she looked, Patricia saw it. People remembering their own strength. Ghost sat beside her. "Think they're ready?" Patricia took a slow sip of tea. "No," she answered honestly. Ghost nodded, waiting. "But they will be," Patricia continued. The wind shifted. The chimes sang. Night settled in. And Riverside Commons, once ruled by manufactured fear, breathed again. Victoria Blake did not slam doors, did not pace, did not raise her voice. Power, she believed, should never look like it's struggling. But as she stood at the head of her dining table that evening, surrounded by her HOA board, the facade was developing cracks. The room was expensive, in the subtle way wealthy people prefer travertine floors, recessed lighting, tasteful southwestern art. But tonight, nothing about it felt warm. The board members sat scattered around the table. Robert Henderson, treasurer's shoulders, slumped. Margaret Flynn, head of architectural review, twisting a turquoise bracelet. Vincent Ruiz, former private security contractor, arms crossed. 3 others, silent, eyes lowered. Victoria placed her hands flat on the polished wood. "You've all seen the neighborhood today," she began. "No violations reported. No one attending the clubhouse. That is not a coincidence." Robert cleared his throat. "They're gathering at the Sanderson house. Every day. More people." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "That will stop." Margaret's voice trembled. "But Victoria, people are saying the brothers were defending themselves. They're saying Patricia is a hero." Victoria interrupted, tone sharp. That woman, she said slowly, is the most dangerous kind of problem, a victim who refuses to act like one. The room froze. She has moral authority, Victoria continued. She has a compelling narrative. She has brothers who know how to hurt people. She poured herself exactly 2 fingers of Cabernet. What they don't have is legal standing, financial resources, or community support that will last once people realize I control their property values. Vincent leaned forward, fingers drumming. If you want to maintain control, he said, you shut this down fast and hard. Victoria's expression sharpened. I agree. Margaret spoke again, too soft. Victoria, what happened at the Starbucks that was assault? That was necessary, Victoria said without hesitation. Robert was watching her more carefully now. He saw the tightness in her jaw, the way her ring tapped the glass, the way she kept glancing toward the window. Victoria wasn't afraid of consequences. She was afraid of irrelevance. Robert swallowed, spoke boldly. Detective Martinez is involved now. The room stilled. Victoria's smile crystallized. I'm aware, she said slowly. Martinez has been sniffing around for 2 years. And what has he found? Her voice softened triumphantly. Nothing actionable. Robert didn't look convinced. He opened his folder, financial statements, inspection orders, lien notifications, all bearing Victoria's signature. Victoria's eyes flicked to the papers. Calculations flickered. Robert lifted his gaze. Victoria, if Martinez gets 1 piece of documented proof, just one, this entire structure collapses. Victoria leaned forward, voice quiet. Then we make certain there is no documented proof. The way she said it, no threat, no dramatics, just decision. Vincent understood. He nodded once. Slow. Margaret looked sick. Robert felt something cold lodge in his chest. Victoria straightened her blouse. Tomorrow morning, we resume enforcement operations. She listed orders, surprise inspections, accelerated violations, lien filings, vehicle citations, noise complaints. Not all at once, she clarified. Strategic pressure, death by 1,000 cuts. Vincent smiled because he recognized counterinsurgency tactics. Victoria raised her wineglass. To restoring order. A few hands lifted weakly. Some didn't lift at all, but the toast was made. Victoria drank, and behind her composed expression, something flickered, not confidence, but desperation, wearing its most expensive mask. Outside, across the subdivision, the porch light of the Sanderson home glowed softly. OneHouse.com. One house, collapsing. The battle had already begun, it just hadn't reached the loudest part yet. Night settled over Tempe. Inside the Sanderson home, the living room lamp cast amber light across the dining table, buried under documents. Sarah typed steadily. Jennifer highlighted timelines. Doc sat near the sliding glass door, watching the cul-de-sac. Ghost cleaned a scrape on his knuckle. Patricia sat in her wheelchair, listening to the rhythm of the house. Then a car engine idled outside, not passing, stopping. Doc's chin lifted. Ghost stood before the knock came. 3 taps. Uncertain. Ghost opened the door halfway, body angled to block entry. Kenny stood there. No leather vest. No swagger. Just a kid in a faded Suns t-shirt, shoulders hunched, eyes red-rimmed. He didn't try to look tough. He looked like something had collapsed inside him. Can I talk to her? Please? Ghost didn't step aside yet. State your purpose. Kenny took a shuddering breath. I didn't know she was military. I didn't know. His voice broke. Patricia's voice came from within, gentle. Let him in. Ghost stepped back. Kenny entered slowly, eyes lowered. Doc shut the door quietly, positioning himself between Kenny and the exit. Kenny stood in the center of the room, hands shaking. Patricia watched him without anger. Kenny swallowed hard. I thought it was just intimidation work. Victoria told us we were enforcing community standards. She didn't tell me it was about breaking people. Ghost said nothing. Doc didn't move. They let him speak. Kenny ran both hands through his hair. I've done stupid shit. I've run with stupid people, but I don't shove veterans. That ain't who I am. Silence. Just waiting. Kenny looked at Patricia, really looked at the scars, the strength, the calm. His voice dropped. When I saw that bronze star, I realized who she was and who I'd just become. Patricia didn't flinch. Kenny shook his head, eyes stinging. I can't undo what I did, but I can help stop what's coming. Doc's voice came low. Define what's coming. Kenny licked his lips. Victoria's doubling down. She'll go quiet now. She's going to choke you out on paper. Violations, inspections, fines, liens, every single day until you break or sell. Sarah exhaled. Financial siege. Kenny nodded. Yeah, only she's got lawyers and shell companies. Patricia's voice remained soft. Why tell us this? Kenny stared at the floor. Nobody ever looked at me like I was worth more than trouble. But you did. You just looked at me. His voice broke. And I want to be somebody I'd be proud of at least once. Silence held the room, not judgment, recognition. Ghost stepped forward. All right. We'll use your testimony. Names, messages, orders, dates. Kenny nodded, tears falling. You'll have everything. Patricia extended her hand. Kenny froze, then breathed for the first time since the Starbucks. Doc spoke quietly. Victoria won't forgive this. She'll come for you too. Kenny nodded. I know. But I'm done being afraid of the wrong people. Patricia's voice was steady. Then we protect each other. For the first time in his life, Kenny belonged to something not built on fear. The knock came just after midnight. 2 slow, deliberate raps. Ghost opened it. Detective Martinez stepped inside, coat draped over one arm, tie loosened, eyes tired but sharp. He carried a banker's box, edges worn, contents heavy. Martinez didn't sit immediately. He scanned the room first. Kenny sat at the table, shoulders hunched. Jennifer and Sarah were beside him. Doc leaned against the wall. Ghost remained standing. Patricia waited in her wheelchair. Only when Martinez met her eyes did he let out a slow breath and take a seat. He set the box on the table. No one rushed to open it. He tapped it once. This, he said quietly, is what Victoria Blake never wanted anyone to see. The room contracted. Martinez continued. For 6 years, she's been running Riverside Commons like a private equity fund. Fines, forced sales, liens on manufactured violations. Then she buys those properties through shell LLCs and flips them. Sarah exchanged a glance with Ghost. They'd suspected. But suspicion wasn't evidence. Evidence was now sitting on the table. Martinez opened it. Emails, recorded calls, meeting minutes, signatures, payment trails. A web woven carefully, now laid bare. Jennifer covered her mouth. Doc's jaw locked. Ghost's hands curled into fists. Patricia asked, voice level, and the enforcers? Martinez nodded grimly. Contracted through one of the shells. No legal oversight. No credentials. No background checks. She called them compliance officers. Kenny flinched. Martinez noticed but didn't comment. She gave them targets, Martinez said. Families who resisted. People who didn't move fast enough. Anyone who questioned her. He closed the box. And your sister, he said quietly to Ghost and Doc, was never random. Ghost didn't speak. Martinez leaned back. Patricia Sanderson, decorated Marine. Survivor. Respected. Visible. His gaze was steady. Victoria feared you'd become a rallying point, a face people would follow. Patricia didn't blink, and she was right. Martinez gave the smallest nod. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a digital recorder, set it on the table. Kenny stared at it. Martinez pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the room, cold, measured, cruel. The Sandersons are a disease, and diseases spread if you don't cut them out early. No one breathed. Order is built on fear, and fear is built on consequences. Make sure they understand both. Even Doc looked shaken. Martinez clicked it off. That recording was sent to me anonymously tonight, he said, by Robert Henderson, the treasurer. The first crack in Victoria's fortress. Martinez looked at each of them. This is enough to move forward to open a formal investigation, bring in the DA, push for warrants, freeze assets. Ghost nodded slowly. So we go to war. Martinez shook his head. No. This war already started. What we do now is finish it correctly. Patricia's voice was soft but iron-reinforced. What do you need from us? Martinez didn't hesitate. Testimony, documentation, and courage in public, not just in Starbucks, but in courtrooms, at community meetings, on the record. These people need to see that standing up is possible. Patricia understood. It wasn't about Victoria. It was about every neighbor still scared to look up. Ghost stepped forward. We'll stand. Doc nodded. Sarah closed her laptop. Jennifer reached for Patricia's hand. Kenny wiped his face, voice raw. So will I. Martinez exhaled acknowledgement. Respect. Outside, the wind shifted through the oleander. The desert night hummed. The storm was no longer approaching. It was here. Morning broke, warm and bright over Tempe. October sunlight made even parking lots look peaceful. A breeze moved through palm trees, stirring wind chimes. Patricia sat outside, coffee steaming, wheelchair angled toward the street. Ghost and Doc stood nearby, not guarding, just present. Not walls, pillars. The first neighbor arrived just after 9. Helen Rodriguez, cardigan buttoned crooked, clutching that envelope. She didn't speak. She simply stood at the driveway, eyes steady. Then came the young father. Then the widow. Then the teenager. Then Susan from the Starbucks. Then Tyler. They didn't gather with fanfare, didn't chant. They stood the way people stand, at important moments side by side. A quiet line of ordinary lives, refusing to bend anymore. Sarah and Jennifer set out folding chairs, not enough for everyone, but no one minded standing. Some neighbors held hands, some crossed their arms, some just breathed deeply for what felt like the first time in years. Patricia looked at them not as witnesses, as a community. When she spoke, her voice didn't rise. I know you're afraid, she said simply, heads bowed. Eyes closed against the truth. Victoria Blake has made this neighborhood believe fear is normal, that silence is safety, that compliance is peace. She paused. But silence isn't peace, it's surrender. A shift moved through the crowd, unmistakable. The teenager wiped her eyes. Susan nodded once, firm. Patricia continued. What happened at the Starbucks wasn't just an attack on me. It was a message meant for all of you. Ghost's jaw tightened. Doc's gaze swept the street. Victoria wanted to show what happens when someone refuses to break, Patricia said. Her hands rested calmly. But I didn't break, and you didn't either. You're here. A sound moved through the group, not noise, but collective resolve becoming audible. Helen stepped forward, voice thin but brave. We don't have to live like this anymore. The young father cleared his throat. My wife cried every time one of those letters came. I thought it was just us. He looked at the others. It wasn't. The widow spoke next, barely above a whisper. I thought if I fought back, I'd lose everything. I didn't realize I'd already lost it by not fighting. Patricia nodded. You get your life back the moment you refuse to be afraid of losing it. Someone sobbed quietly, not from sorrow, from release. Then the gate across the street opened. Detective Martinez walked up the sidewalk, not rushed, not armed, just present. He stopped at the edge of the crowd. Search warrants are being executed as we speak, he said clearly. We'll need statements, documentation, witnesses willing to testify, not in whispers, on the record. Silence held a trembling pause. Then Helen raised her hand. I'll speak. The father raised his. Me too. The widow lifted her chin. So will I. One by one, hands rose. Voices followed, not loud, not angry, just done being afraid. Even Kenny stepped forward, shoulders squared. I'll testify, he said, against the woman who'd paid him, against the man he'd followed, against the person he'd been. Martinez didn't praise him, just nodded, filing it away. Ghost exhaled slow. Doc blinked hard once. Jennifer squeezed Sarah's hand. Patricia looked at them all. This patchwork group of teachers and fathers and widows and kids. This neighborhood belongs to you, she said quietly. Not to fear, not to an HOA board, and not to the woman who forgot this was a community, not a kingdom. The crowd didn't cheer. They stood. And sometimes standing is louder than shouting. Across the subdivision, behind tinted windows, Victoria Blake watched. Her jaw clenched. Her hand tightened around a wine glass until the stem creaked. She'd spent 6 years teaching people to hide, but today they stepped into sunlight, and she had no darkness left to pull them back into. The morning the raid came, the sky was quiet turquoise. Sprinklers clicked to life. Dogs barked behind decorative walls. Someone scraped a chair to sit with coffee. To anyone watching, it looked like any other peaceful day. But peace was never the default here. It was fought for, earned. And today it arrived with warrants and federal agents. Unmarked SUVs rolled in first. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady and inevitable. Black sedans followed, then Tempe PD cruisers, then more SUVs. Doors opened without slamming. Agents stepped out wearing windbreakers with 3 letters on the back. FBI. Vests. Earpieces. Quiet coordination. Not dramatic spectacle. Professional, dismantling the kind reserved for people who believed they were untouchable until they weren't. Across the street, the Sandersons watched from their patio. Patricia sat with hands folded, morning light warming her face. Ghost stood beside her, arms crossed, watchful. Doc leaned against the column. Jennifer and Sarah sat on the steps, fingers interlaced. They didn't speak, didn't need to. This moment spoke for itself. Victoria Blake stood in her circular driveway, silk robe and designer slippers, chin lifted high. Her hands were steady. Her breath was controlled. She was a woman who'd rehearsed for confrontation, but only scenarios where she won. She blinked once when the lead federal agent approached. Just once. "Victoria Blake," he said, clear and formal. "You're under arrest for racketeering, extortion, criminal conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, and unlawful employment of unregistered enforcement personnel. Neighbors gathered on patios, driveways, sidewalks, some in bathrobes, some holding coffee cups, some barefoot in dew-wet grass, but none looked away, not anymore. Victoria's voice, when it came, was soft, almost gentle. "You don't understand," she said. "I was maintaining order, protecting property values." The agent did not respond. He simply reached for her wrists. The cuffs clicked a small sound, but it carried across lawns, across years, across every quiet injustice. Victoria did not fight, didn't scream, didn't try to run. As they guided her into the SUV, Victoria turned her head just enough to find Patricia across the street. The 2 women looked at each other, one standing on principle, one sitting in a wheelchair, both shaped by hard things. Only one still had her dignity. Victoria's voice was barely more than a breath. "You think this ends with me?" Patricia didn't raise her chin, didn't lean forward, didn't smile. She simply said, calm as sunrise, "It ends when people stop being afraid." The door closed. And Victoria Blake, the woman who'd believed she could control an entire neighborhood through manufactured fear, was driven away in absolute silence. The applause didn't come right away. Not loud, not wild, but like a single match struck in darkness. A quiet clap from Helen, then the young father, then Tyler, tears streaking his cheeks. Then everyone not celebrating a fall, but celebrating a return. The return of belonging, home, safety, each other. Later that afternoon, long after the vehicles were gone, the community gathered, not at a clubhouse, but on the Sanderson lawn, spilling onto the sidewalk, filling the cul-de-sac with folding chairs and card tables, and food. No speeches, no microphones, just neighbors bringing what they had, chairs, dishes, stories, laughter. Grandparents smiled again. Kids ran without being shushed. People looked each other in the eye and remembered names. The air tasted different. Ghost stood near a borrowed grill, flipping burgers, smoke curling upward. Doc played catch with neighborhood kids, letting them win, teaching them how to throw. Sarah helped fix a neighbor's fence gate that had been broken for 8 months, not because of HOA rules, but because the owner had been too ashamed to ask for help. Shame was gone now, evaporated like desert puddles. Jennifer stitched a simple banner from white fabric and blue markers. Riverside stands together. She hung it from the patio beam. Not a victory flag, a reminder. Patricia watched the street, her street, alive again, with the kind of life she'd fought for overseas, bled for in hospitals, rebuilt from ashes more times than she could count. She breathed in slow, deep, full oxygen tasting, sweeter than it had in years. Ghost sat beside her without saying a word. Doc joined them, grass stains on his jeans, a foam football still in his hand. Sarah and Jennifer sat on the porch steps, shoulders leaning together, exhausted and exhilarated. The wind moved through the palm trees, soft, carrying the scent of mesquite. Patricia spoke not loudly, not ceremoniously, just honestly. "Home," Ghost nodded once. Doc closed his eyes, letting the moment rest on his shoulders. No one needed to say anything else. Because some victories don't shout or parade or demand attention. Some victories sit quietly beside you at sunset, in a folding chair on a desert lawn, surrounded by people who finally remembered how to stand. And they stay.